Following my comparison of two cheap bass-friendly IEMs, the KZ Caster and the MS1 Galaxy von Hiddish, this will be the throw money at Linsol and get an even better one for all your wet electro-industrial and electro-industrial dreams. I will say upfront that both of these work with basically all genres. These don't have the 7Hz legato or alt beats level bass, but they are still pretty bassy and should satisfy a lot of bass lovers. For this video I chose the Kiwi Ears Melody, which has a planar magnetic driver, and the Tangzu Fudu Verse, which has a dynamic driver and two balanced armatures. Both of these are around €100, and I guess many people were looking at these two and couldn't decide, so hopefully after watching this video you will be more confident in your decision which one to buy for yourself. So let's start with build quality, and let's start with the Kiwi Ears Melody. Again, the Kiwi Ears Melody actually has a planar magnetic driver in it, so it covers the price bracket between the pretty cheap KZ planars like PR2 and now the PR3, and the more expensive ones like the 7Hz Timeless. And the Melody could be seen as a competitor of the Lecture S12 and the S12 Pro, which is a well-known and popular planar IEM. In contrast to a lot of other IEMs I recently reviewed, the Melody is a lot less fancy and resembles a more quality Truth Ear Holler. It's a kinda small IEM, similar grayish color, really lightweight housing that feels pretty sturdy, and just the Kiwi Ears logo on the backplate there. No see-through shell or anything, which I guess will be a plus for a lot of users who don't want to wear jewelry in their ears. And yeah, the cable also feels good, and it should be for €100, but it's still not exceptionally or anything. In my eyes, the cables you can buy from TripoWin that cost like around €20 are still better. And it feels a little rigid at times. Yeah, it's an okay cable, but don't expect wonders here. The Fudu has a dynamic driver and two balanced armatures, which is a pretty common combination for this price class, but a good one that should work well if it's tuned in a good way. Similar to the Melody, the Fudu spots a less flashy design, but it looks a lot more elegant than the Melody and feels more expansive in hand. The backplate has this nice uneven diamond-like structure that feels a little rough, but in a very nice way. These are also rather light and remind me of the Truth Ear Hexa regarding size and feel. I do like the cable of the Fudu a little bit more. It feels better woven, if I'm choosing that word correctly here, and it's more flexible than the one on the Melody. I usually do not talk much about ear tips, because if you even buy your second or third IEM, you will already have a collection of ear tips, be it from the IEM packages themselves or because you bought specific ones. But the ones Tangzu chose to put into the package here are awesome. I really like these. They have a rough texture, but they seal really well and feel really good to wear, at least for me. Tangzu also sells these separately for quite some money, so I count that as a plus here. But you do also get normal silicone ones that feel nice as well. Comfort on the Melody is pretty good. It feels really comfortable. Again, it's pretty light and nothing here feels obtrusive to my ears. The included ear tips are fine, but not exceptionally good stuff. Again, ear tips are pretty subjective, I guess, and these feel good to me. I could easily get a good seal here, a nice fit, does not feel loose. It's just nice to wear even for an extended period of time. Comfort on the Tangzu Fudu, to be honest here, feels just as nice as on the Melody, and I struggle to feel a noticeable difference here. It's a good seal and a good fit for me. The only thing is, again, that the Tangzu ear tips feel a little nicer to my skin, so that's a plus here. But all in all, both IEMs are really comfortable and there should be no issues here. The nozzle is neither too wide or too big, and again, the whole IEM is kinda small, so it does not protrude out of your ear. and it should fit really well for most ears here. It's somewhat smaller than the Melody, but if I wear these in my ear and I'm listening to music to it, the feeling is similar, so they are both very comfortable here. Finally, let's talk about sound, and again, starting with the Melody here. Regarding bass, the Melody has a pretty big boost through the whole bass range, but you will mostly notice the punch in the mid bass. For having this amount of bass, the bass stays surprisingly textured and clean. It also sounds pretty fast, which contributes to the overall clean frequencies here and the good amount of slam. So basically the clear and sharp bass kick. Basically the opposite of a limp and muddy bass. It hits you really hard and it's quite a lot of rumble and punch. So you do get kind of a best of both worlds here, bass that is very present and basically the focus of the IEM, yet you can separate bass notes pretty well and they do not mush together. It's also very well extended, so you get a lot of really deep bass notes. All of these things are characteristics you can more or less contribute to a well-tuned planar magnetic driver, so well done here, Kiwi Ears. But I did listen to a lot of reviews where reviewers are saying that this sounds more like a dynamic driver than a planar regarding bass. But I do notice quite a bit of a difference, especially going back and forth with the Fudu. The Melody does not have that ultra good planar bass clarity and texture that I know from over-ear planars, for example, but I did not expect that from an 100 euro IEM with a bassy and warm sound. I guess the Shure S12 or the 7Hz Timeless would be more fitting here if you want that really tight, really ultra clean bass. This does it as good as it gets for the amount of bass, and there's a lot of bass. The bass also does impact the mid-range quite a bit. You do not have a fast roll off from the mid-bass into the lower mid-range, but rather a slow transition, which means you have a pretty thick mid-range. So you do have a bass veil over most vocals and instruments that takes away some clarity in the mid-range here and makes these somewhat soft and less natural. On the plus side, there's no harshness here, and it has this nice warm tuning that makes most music just pleasant to listen to. Do not expect a technical monster regarding clarity here. It can handle most stuff pretty well, but mid-range really is not the focus of the Melody, and most vocals that are not deeper male vocals are pushed back somewhat. The treble is one of the few gripes I have with the sound here. The lower treble, just as the upper mid-range, is fairly relaxed, and though that contributes to the darker sound, the mid and upper treble has weird things going on that make sibilant vocals like S or Z kinda piercing sometimes, same as cymbals. This does not happen every time and on every song, but it is noticeable, and people that are sensitive here should know that. This is also something that happens with a lot of planar IEMs and headphones. If you do not tune it out of the sound profile, you have this pretty recognizable sizzle and a certain shimmer in the upper treble, and the Melody does have quite a bit of treble energy after a certain point, and depending on the song, it is quite an airy and open sounding IEM. At the same time, it's not completely bright, and listeners who like brighter IEMs will also be unsatisfied here. So it's just a little weird here in the upper frequencies, but I do forget about that most of the time. It's not a game breaker for the Melody, at least for me. Now let's go on with the Tangzu Fudu. The overall sound profile of the Fudu is bassy with a slightly laid back treble and pretty good and present mid-range. So again, let's separate how the different frequencies are working, and let's start with bass. The Fudu has a pretty big boost in the bass, especially in the lower bass. It's extended pretty well, has rumbly bass and good mid-bass punch. The main difference here is that the Fudu to me sounds fatter and bigger. It has a more classic bassy response where the bass notes stay a little longer, which contributes to a more relaxed sound. So the Melody does have an advantage here when it comes to overall textured bass sound, but also at the same time it has a bit more kick in the bass. The Fudu does sound bassier in itself, just a fatter sound, and it is by no means sluggish or muddy, just a bit more so than the planar magnetic driver of the melody. Also, the stronger amount of lower bass in the Fudu is really well tuned. It's quite a lot to satisfy people who like bass, but not so much that it would constantly overwhelm other frequencies or make different bass notes that play at the same time getting washed out or blurred together. The mid-range of the Fudu feels cleaner and less recessed than on the melody, and the mid bass also bleeds less into the mid range. It's still a smooth tuning that does not sound harsh to me, but voices feel a lot more present, same as instruments, less softened and more forward. So most things sound more natural and real on the Fudu. This is something I really like and look for in bass boosted IEMs, because most times you will have the slightly thin and artificial sound, especially with guitars, and then the treble is boosted, which makes these sound even more unnatural. So that's not the case here. Treble is pretty laid back, just as the melody, but without the peaks and the upper treble emphasis that the melody has. So it sounds smoother to me here, which further complements the sound profile. It's not dull or compressed sounding though, but do not expect a lot of brilliance here in the highs. There's no sibilance, and if you're treble sensitive and have to decide between these two IEMs, the Fudu is your way to go. So by now you may have guessed that these two are not the most technical IEMs in the world. While yes, separation of instruments and the soundscape itself works pretty well, the tuning is more intended to enjoy music rather than analyzing it. I would say the melody is maybe a bit more detailed and a bit more capable than the Fudu, but for gaming especially, I found the Tangzu Fudu to be better. I could play stuff like footsteps or gunshots really well, which did become somewhat blurry on the melody. There's this notion in the audiophile world that planar magnetic drivers do image a little weird sometimes, especially in games, so maybe it has something to do with that, but maybe that's just placebo, who knows. Anyway, I like the Fudu more in that file. So after you hopefully watched the whole video, your conclusion should be the same as mine, namely that these two are pretty different. Obviously both are rather bass heavy, but the melody is the more extreme sounding one, with more energy in the treble region, and bass that slams quite hard, with instruments and voices being pushed back somewhat. Whereas with the Fudu you get that thick and bassy sound with a more forward mid-range, where other instruments can shine through the bass, and treble is pushed back more, so it never gets piercing, but it's still not muddy or muted. So that's it with this comparison. I hope you liked it, and if you did so, then tell me in the comments. Otherwise, see you soon and have a nice day. Goodbye.